Most of us think of Freud as like a cartoon figure. I think many of us are ambivalent as to precisely his role in contemporary thought. On the one hand, it's very common to, for instance, see a friend who is sharpening all their pencils and making sure all their other writing utensils are in good order and say, oh, they are being very anal, for example, or somebody might say a behavior is very neurotic. It's common sense to describe aspects of human behavior in terms that Freud and many of his colleagues popularized in the first part of the 20th century. On the other hand, as I have said, many people think of Freud as someone poised between science and literature, and it's by no means the case that psychoanalysis as a movement has anything like the prestige that he did 75 years ago. So I think many of us are ambivalent. We want to try to explain our own and other behavior in psychoanalytic terms, or at least use some of the principle of psychoanalysis. The question is that a legitimate attitude to have, and if not, why is it not? But back to the principle of inference to the best explanation. So, for example, in the early part of the 20th century, scientists came forward with the idea of plate tectonics as an explanation for a number of phenomena such as earthquake and the creation of a mountain range. For about a half a century after that, evidence about the spreading of the sea flu came to provide pretty powerful justification for that theory. Can something like that happen for Freud's approach? That's a question that we will be asking. Now is Freud begin to present his theory of the primarily unconscious mind. He tells us that there are two crucial hypotheses in psychoanalysis that are described as an insult to the entire world. One of them is first of all the claim that there are unconscious processes. The second one is the idea that those particular unconscious processes are primarily engaged with impulses of a sexual and violent character that he thinks are the bulk of what's happening in our unconscious minds, and according to him explain a lot of human behavior. If we think of the incredible influence that Descartes and many of his followers had on primarily Western intellectual inquiry, it should come as no surprise that the idea of a mental state is almost something that brings with it by definition the idea that it would be conscious. That's why Descartes was able to, in the process of developing his own rigorous theory of the physical world, start out with introspection, whereas if Freud writes some processes are not open to introspection. What is perhaps more shocking too is that those processes are very much about sexuality and violence. The idea being that without necessarily being aware of it, many of us have this powerful urge towards rapacious sexual activity, towards unfettered violence, probably express themselves in our behavior, but somehow for most of us manage not to do so, and it will require some explaining as to how that goes. So let me just go back to the notion of the unconscious to make sure that we are clear about what it is. There's a difference between something being non-conscious and something being unconscious. There are all kinds of phenomena that happen inside me that are non-conscious and not in any sense unconscious. What would be required to make a process inside of me unconscious is I would have to be a mental phenomenon. As we have seen before, mental phenomena divided to three primary types. So those three primary types of mental states, cognitive, affective, exploration, are going to be the constituents of the mind. To claim that there's an unconscious phenomenon is therefore going to be to claim that there is a phenomenon that's occurring inside of me that is not conscious, but it's nevertheless a cognitive, affective, or experiential state. Now the question is, what sorts of things could those be? What would they be like? Now could we possibly be convinced that any of those things is actually occurring inside of us?